The absinthian wind cut aloft the Wyoming basin like a blade, aciculate and unforgiving, accustomed with it the weight of addition, acrid winter. Ethan Rollins stood on the advanced balustrade of his agronomical house, his eyes anchored on the ablaze dusk biconcave abaft the Asperus Mountains. At 32, he was the richest agriculturist for miles, buyer of 5,000 acreage and added beasts than best men could dream of. His abode was abounding with accomplished things from Denver and beyond. Persian rugs, clear lamps, books apprenticed in leather, yet none of it abounding the alveolate anguish in his chest. It had been 3 years aback the agitation took Sarah, his wife, and little James. 3 years aback he active them on the Acropolis abaft the cottonwoods. He had befuddled himself into work, architecture his authority bigger and stronger, aggravating, to outrun the blackout that echoed in every allowance of the abundant house. But as the caliginosity continued aloft the land, Ethan knew he was not active anymore. He was continuing still, haunted. Mr. Rollins. The abashed articulation drew him back. He angry, and saw her in the doorway. Clara Bennett, the new maid who had accustomed 3 weeks ago from Ohio. She couldn't accept been added then 20. Her wheat-colored beard was affianced aback in an accurate bun, her gray eyes downcast, as admitting a fare his boring would breach some rule. She captivated her capote abutting about her shoulders, her apparent amber dress authoritative, her attending alike abate in the doorway. "Yes, Miss Bennett." "Supper's ready, sir. Mrs. Henderson said to acquaint you it's beef bouillon tonight with alpha bread." Ethan nodded but fabricated no move to appear inside. Clara confused her weight from one bottom to the other, abashed like a aerial bent out in the open. "Will you be demography it in the dining room, sir, or—" She trailed off, her articulation crumbling into the algid black air. "The study." Ethan said at last, "I accept ledgers to review." "Yes, sir." She biconcave a babyish angle and abolished a back inside. He lingered on the porch, watching the aboriginal stars beam into life. He wondered why this shy maid, who about batten aloft a whisper, lingered in his thoughts at all. Perhaps it was her quietness, a mirror of his own solitude. Perhaps it was the way she confused about the house, able yet about invisible, like she was abashed to booty up space. Inside, the blaze crackled in the abstraction as Ethan took his bench at the abundant oak desk. Shelves of books lined the walls, admitting he rarely opened them. Numbers abounding his nights instead. Columns of beasts' sales, acreage purchases, profits. Abundance meant control. Abundance meant no one could booty what little he had left. Clara entered with a tray. She confused carefully, ambience bottomward the bleared basin of stew, the bolt-captivated bread and a bottle of water. Her easily trembled hardly as she placed anniversary account aloof so, like the aboriginal aberration would accompany bottomward, barrage on her head. "Thank you," Ethan said. She gave a quick nod and angry to leave, but her boring bent on the account aloft his desk. Sarah in her bell's dress, captivation babyish James, the abandoned benevolence larboard in that allowance, of adamantine cops and blaze light. "You had a admirable family, sir," Clara said softly. Afresh bit her lip as if she had announced out of turn. "They were," he answered simply. Clara ablaze and slipped out, closing the aperture abaft her. Ethan ate afterwards tasting, his eyes, kept afloat to the portrait, afresh aback to the bankrupt door. That night he formed until midnight, his pen abrading numbers aloft amaranthine pages. But as he climbed the stairs adjoin his room, a aside complete chock-full him. A voice, soft, low, advancing from the kitchen. He confused agilely bottomward the hall, endlessly al fresco the door. There she was, abrasion dishes below the lamplight. Her aback to him, and she was speaking, not to anyone, but as admitting, the words central her chest had to discharge out into the abandoned room. "Tomorrow I'll dust the parlor added well," she murmured. "Mr. Rollins doesn't use it much, but it should be proper, and I'll brightness the argent again. Alike if Mrs. Henderson says already a anniversary is enough. Such accomplished argent account added than Papa's abundance any time." Was. Her articulation trembled, her amateur afraid slightly. She absorbed the bend of the basin. "No crying, Clara Marie," she aside to herself. "You're advantageous to accept this roof, these wages. Some girls end up worse. Mr. Rollins is fair, alike if he looks so sad. Those eyes like he's staring at ghosts." Ethan's chest tightened. He stepped aback into the shadows. Ghosts, that's what she saw in him, what he had become. The abutting night he waited in his study. This time, he let the blaze bake low, sat aback in his chair, abandoned his collar, and let his eyes close. To anyone entering, he would attending like a man comatose afterwards a continued day's work. The aperture creaked open. Clara's ablaze, accomplish aloft the floor. She paused at his desk, acquisition dishes assimilate her tray. Afresh she came closer. Ethan acquainted the besom of bendable easily as she pulled the absolute from the back of his armchair and draped it acclaim over him. "Poor man," she whispered. "Animate yourself to exhaustion. Won't accompany them back." "I know. I accustomed it myself." Ethan about opened his eyes, but he kept still, animation steady. Clara confused to the hearth, adulation the dying blaze aback to life. She lingered at the portrait. "You had an admirable family, Mr. Rollins," she said softly. "I achievement you acquisition accord someday. The way you attending at them aback you anticipate no one's watching, it breach my heart. I apperceive what it's like to lose everything, but you're still here, still breathing. That charge calculation for something." She angry to go, pausing one after most time beside his chair. "Sleep well, sir, tomorrow's a new day." The aperture bankrupt with an affable click. Ethan sat unmoving, the amore of the blaze seeping aback into the room, but his thoughts afire. Hotter. This shy babe who hid in blackout during the day, agitated a abyss he had not expected. And her kindness, the blanket, the fire, the words had burst the algid armor he had congenital about his heart. For the aboriginal time in years, Ethan Rollins wondered about tomorrow. The canicule that followed abandoned deepened Ethan's curiosity. Every black afterward supper he larbored the dishes clear on his desk, abandoned his collar and acclimatized into his armchair as if Betty Bye had claimed him. And every night, aloof accomplished 11, Clara came. Sometimes she battened to herself, as she tidied, bendable thoughts about chores, about the way the parlor curtains bent the sunlight, about her mother's acquaint and befitting a house. Sometimes she artlessly confused in silence, her blow affable as she added cops to the blaze or straightened his blanket. But every night, afterwards fail, she lingered at the account of Sarah and James. On the third night, she placed a babyish tin on the ancillary table. "Your hands, Mr. Rollins," she whispered, abrasion her fingers aloft the tin. "They're absurd from the cold. Mama acclimated to accomplish this complete from affair and herbs. I achievement you don't mind. I anticipation maybe it would advice." Ethan's throat tightened. He capital to acknowledge her to acquaint her he wasn't asleep, but article captivated him back. He didn't appetite to breach the spell, not yet. By the fifth night, Clara's articulation had developed added open, about confessional. "Mrs. Henderson says, 'You congenital all this with your own hands,'" she murmured, wiping bottomward his already accurate desk. Papa would accept admired that. He consistently said America was area a man could accomplish himself into anything. Of course he said that about his investments too, and we all apperceive how that ended. Her articulation absurd, and she bound added, "Still, I'm beholden for this place. Some girls on the alternation with me weren't so lucky. One went to a ball anteroom in Denver." She cried the accomplished aftermost day, animate what affectionate of job it was. "That could accept been me if not for you." Ethan clenched, his easily into fists below the blanket. How had he never noticed afore, how abundant backbone this abashed babe agitated in her slight frame. But on the seventh night, aggregate changed. Clara entered as usual, accustomed her tray, but her accomplish were unsteady. Her face ablaze in the blaze, a blaze glistened with sweat. She set the tray bottomward with abashed easily and swayed. "Aloof a little fever," she whispered. "Finish the chores, Clara. Don't be weak." Aback she stumbled. Ethan could no best pretend. He surged forward, communicable her afore she fell. "Miss Bennett." His articulation abashed her. Her gray eyes widened with shock and shame. "You were awake," she gasped. "All this time you knew." "You're a fire up," Ethan interrupted. "Calm her. You shouldn't be on your feet." Quote, "I'm fine," she protested weakly. "Please don't agitation Mrs. Henderson if she thinks I can't work." "Sit," Ethan commanded, allegorical her into the armchair adverse his own. His accent bankrupt no argument. Moments later, Mrs. Henderson arrived, her aciculate eyes, demography one attending at Clara afore clucking her argot fever. "I knew you looked anemic at supper." Clara shrank into herself. "I didn't appetite to be a burden." "A burden," the charwoman barked. "Girl, about animate yourself into the grave isn't a affection to anyone." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Send Tom for Dr. Morrison." "Now," Mrs. Henderson blinked. "At this hour, for a servant's fever for one of my people," Ethan said firmly. "Send him." Clara's cheeks flamed. "You charge anticipate me absurd talking to you while you affected to sleep." Saying all those things, Ethan's boring softened, not foolish. "Kind. Kinder than I deserved." She bargained her eyes. Tears bottomward silently, bottomward her cheeks. The doctor accustomed an hour later, blubbering about midnight calls. Afterwards analytical Clara, he straightened with a sigh. Exhaustion. Underweight, busy herself. Annihilation blow and able aliment won't cure. She'll animate if she stays in bed. He gave Ethan a continued animate look. "Strange to see you so anxious for a maid, Rollins, but acceptable to see you affliction." About article aloft, beasts and ledgers again. Aback Clara was acclimatized in her babyish room. Ethan lingered, staring at the little tin of salve she had fabricated for him. A maid with annihilation to her name had noticed his affliction and accustomed to affluence it. The action ashamed him. For 3 days, Clara remained in bed by his adjustment, admitting her protests. She fretted about absent work, about actuality a burden, about accident her position. "Babe doesn't accept kindness," Mrs. Henderson said. "Been kicked 2 abounding times to apprehend annihilation else." On the 4th day, Ethan agape a claim on her door. Clara sat propped on pillows, bed-making admitting her power. At the after-image, of him she accustomed to rise, but he coiled her back. "How are you feeling?" he asked, affairs armchair close. "Much better, sir. I'll be aback to assignment tomorrow, I promise. You'll acknowledgement aback Dr. Morrison says you're ready." Not afore he paused, afresh took a breath. "I owe you an apology." Clara's countenance channeled for what? For artful you assuming to sleep. Listening aback I should not have. She ablaze crimson. "Afresh you heard everything." "Everything?" he admitted. "Oh, how mortifying," she whispered, accoutrement her face. "Not mortifying," he said cautiously, illuminating. "Clara Ara, your affection reminded me that simple benevolence still exists in this world. You've done added for me in a few weeks than abundance or acreage any time could." Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "I apperceive what accident feels like, Mr. Rollins. I abandoned capital you not to feel so alone." He accomplished for her hand, his articulation low and rough. "You'll do no added ablution floors. Aback your well, I'd like you to be head maid. Bigger wages, lighter duties, you've becoming it." Her aperture beggared in shock. "But I've abandoned in actuality 3 weeks. In 3 weeks you've apparent added affection than best do in a lifetime." He rose to leave, but she chock-full him with a whisper. "Mr. Rollins, were you absolutely animate every night?" He accustomed a babyish smile. "Every night," she active her, face in her easily with a groan. But Ethan absolved abroad with article active in his chest, article he hadn't acquainted in years. Hope. The storm that activated that achievement came weeks later. A February blast formed bottomward from the mountains afterwards warning, burying the basin in snow and ball winds. Ethan wrote out to analysis the abundant cows, but the storm addled faster than expected. Hours later, bisected frozen, he staggered, aback to the ranch. His anatomy added ice than flesh. The kitchen aperture flew accessible and Clara was there. "Mr. Rollins?" she cried, her face white with fear. She bent his arm as he about collapsed, boring him into the adored warmth. His easily were white, waxy, about frostbitten. Clara knelt afore him afterwards, hesitation abrading them amid her own. "Oh no," she sighed fiercely. "Not you. Not like this. Hold on." For the abutting hour, she and Mrs. Henderson fought to balmy him. Spooning borscht accomplished his chattering, teeth, abrading activity aback into his arctic limbs. Aback the affliction came, a fire affliction as Claret returned. Clara never let go of his hands. "You're safe," she whispered. Captivation him abutting adjoin her warmth. "You're home. Betty bye, now." Ethan drifted into a sleep with her articulation anchoring him, and aback he woke, sunlight on his face. The aboriginal affair he saw was Clara comatose in an armchair by his bedside, her Duke still captivated about his. For the aboriginal time aback Sarah and James, Ethan Rollins acquainted absolutely alive. Spring accustomed apathetic that year, the snow melting into streams that cut through the Wyoming valley, abrogation the acreage alpha and blooming already more. The agronomical bustled with new life, beasts barrier on capricious legs, agrarian flowers dotting the fields, and a faculty of facelifting in the air. For Ethan Rollins it was not aloof the acreage that was changing. It was his heart. He had lived too continued in the adumbration of grief, closing himself off, assertive no sunlight could any time ability him again. But Clara Bennett had absolved, agilely into his house, into his life, and with her affable, easily and quiet words, she had burst through walls that abundance and assignment could never breach down. Every day he began himself gluttonous her presence. At Aboriginal, it was babyish. Things. Allurement her assessment on the adjustment of flowers in the parlor or abiding a little best aback she brought tea, but anon it was more. One afternoon he began her acclamation a shirt by the window, her face lit by the balmy afterglow of the sun. He chock-full in the doorway, watching silently until she looked up. "Abashed, Mr. Rollins?" she asked, her cheeks, "Bloom, Ethan." He adapted softly, her easily still-illed on the fabric. "I couldn't. I shouldn't. You've cared for me, added candidly than anyone has in years," he said, dispatch closer. "If anyone has the appropriate to alarm me by name, it's you." Her aperture trembled, but she whispered, "Ethan." It was the sweetest complete he had heard in a continued time. One evening, the basin aggregate for a barn ball at a adjoining ranch. Music abounding the air, fiddles and amusement accustomed aloft the night. Ethan stood at the bend of the crowd, his accomplished covering and boots appearance him as the richest man there. Yet he acquainted abnormally apart. That was until he saw Clara. She wore a simple, dejected dress, annihilation fancy, but in Ethan's eyes she was the brightest brilliant in the room. She stood off to the side, uncertain, her easily bound tightly. The accumulation of adolescent men glanced her way, but none approached. She was too quiet, too guarded. Ethan aloft the attic afterwards hesitation. "Miss Bennett," he said, alms his hand. "Would you admission me this dance?" Her eyes widened. "Oh no, I couldn't. Anybody will stare." "Let them." His articulation was abutting but kind. "Please." She hesitated. A fresh boring placed her Duke in his. The music swelled and Ethan led her aloft the floor. At first her accomplish were clumsy, her face ablaze with nerves, but Ethan's abiding Duke guided her and anon she was laughing. An unguarded, blissful complete that angry every arch in the barn. For a moment, Ethan acquainted the weight of his affliction lift, replaced by article, new article bright. Aback the song ended, the army clapped, and Clara, accustomed to cull away, but Ethan captivated her hand. "One more," he asked softly. She met his gaze, her gray eyes shining. "One more, but not anybody approved." Whispers began to spread. Through town, the affluent agriculturist and the maid. Folks said Clara was extensive aloft her station, that Ethan was addled by loneliness. Some alleged her a affluent seeker. Clara heard the whispers in the market, acquainted the stares at church. She shrank below them, her old fears bit by bit back. One evening she arranged a babyish bag, intending to blooper abroad afore dawn. But aback she opened the door. Ethan was already there, continuing in the dim ablaze of the hall. "You were leaving," he said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes. "I can't accompany abashment to your name. Bodies are talking. Let them talk." His articulation was steady, but his eyes austere with emotion. "Clara, I've spent years active for what bodies thought, for appearances or for respectability, and it larbored me empty. You brought me back to life. I won't lose that because of gossip." She befuddled her head, tears spilling bottomward her cheeks. "You deserve addition your equal." He stepped closer, demography her easily in his. "I already begin her. My according isn't abstinent in abundance or land. It's abstinent in heart. And Clara, castigation is stronger than anyone I've any time known." Her animation caught, her anatomy trembling. "Ethan." He pulled her into his arms, captivation her close. "Stay. Please body activity actuality with me. Not as a maid, as my partner, as my wife." Clara's tears, angry to quiet sobs, adjoin his chest, but she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The Bells was small, captivated below the cottonwood copse area Sarah and James rested. Ethan battened their names cautiously afore the ceremony, allurement their blessing. The wind afflicted the branches gently, as if answering. Clara stood in, a simple white dress, her easily abashed in his as they said their vows. Aback the preacher declared them bedmate and wife. Ethan kissed her with the affiance of a new beginning. The basin would talk, of course, but Ethan no best cared. For the aboriginal time in years he acquainted whole. Clara, already a shy maid, ambuscade her pain, now stood at his ancillary as his equal, his partner, his love. Together, they faced the advanced accessible West, not as two burst souls but as one. And in the quiet of the agronomical abode that night, Ethan aside into the dark, "Tomorrow is a new day." Clara smiled, her arch comatose on his chest. "Yes," she said softly. "And this time we'll face it.